How's it going, y'all? And welcome to Nature Time with Luke. When I was a kid, I loved looking through my parents' animal books. And given the fact that they were both zookeepers and loved animals, we always had a wide array of books to choose from. Among my parents' book collection was a set of Peterson field guides which detailed hundreds of different species ranging from plants and fungi to insects and mammals. Although I loved every one of these books for different reasons, my favorite volume to look through was the Bird Guide. I remember being in total awe of the sheer diversity of shapes and colors that could be seen by flipping through its pages. This was especially true whenever I got to the warbler section. If you asked me what my favorite species of warbler is, I think I'd have to go with the Canada Warbler. Not only is this a beautiful species of bird, but it is also the icon of Canada's leading charity for bird conservation, Birds Canada. So join me in this video as I embark on a quest to locate and film the Canada Warbler. The first place I decided to check was none other than Lesser Slave Lake Provincial Park. Since the park's forest featured a good mix of deciduous and coniferous trees as well as a dense understory, I knew many of the boxes had been ticked for good Canada Warbler habitat. As I walked along the trail, I noticed some movement out of the corner of my eye along the forest floor. Although it wasn't a Canada Warbler, it was still a species of warbler that I was very excited to see. The bird in question was none other than the Ovenbird, a species which gets its name from being the only bird to use an oven to cook its food. I'm just kidding. It's actually because their dome-shaped nests bear a striking resemblance to that of a Dutch oven. This particular individual was a male who was singing quite loudly in order to attract a mate and defend his territory. Although I didn't find any Canada Warblers that morning, getting such excellent looks at an Ovenbird definitely made up for it. On my way back from the trail, I stopped to admire some of the more common birds that were flitting about. And for a good chunk of time, I watched this American robin foraging for food. Not far away were the local pair of eastern phoebes who were busy collecting insects to feed their young. If you look closely at this bird, you'll notice it has feathers which somewhat resemble whiskers at the base of its beak. These are called rictal bristles. Although scientists don't fully understand the purpose of these feathers, they are believed to help the bird detect changes in wind currents while they are flying and keep debris out of their eyes. As I made my way back home after a successful morning of birding, I heard a familiar sound from overhead. The sound was coming from a bird that I've heard many times before, but rarely ever seen. This skulky bird is the red-eyed Vireo, a species which has been nicknamed the question bird due to the rising inflection of its vocalizations. The following morning, I set out once again to look for Canada Warblers. At first I didn't see or hear any sign of birds, but what I did find was plenty of invertebrates, so in lieu of any birds, I filmed them instead. As I busied myself by watching the insects and arachnids, I noticed a small yellow bird foraging close by, which turned out to be a Mourning Warbler. Up until now, I had only ever heard Mourning Warblers, so this find was extremely exciting for me. What I didn't know was that this morning was about to get even more exciting, because it was at this point that I heard a quiet chirp coming from the understory. Through the dense leaves, I picked out a flash of gray and yellow. It was none other than the Canada Warbler. For the first 20 minutes that I spent with this bird, I really struggled to get a good shot. Not only was this male exceptionally fast, but he also rarely perched on any branch that wasn't obstructed by leaves. But as with many things, persistency usually pays off. As mentioned at the beginning of this video, the Canada Warbler is the icon of Birds Canada, Canada's leading charity for bird conservation. And I'm sure some of you are wondering why it is that the Canada Warbler was chosen over more quintessentially Canadian birds, such as the Canada goose or the common loon. Reason being that the Canada Warbler is classified as a species at risk in Canada. Between 1970 and 2014, the Canada Warbler experienced a population decline of 62%. This was largely due to a loss of habitat in its wintering range in Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru as a result of deforestation to make way for coffee plantations. Although Canada Warbler populations have slowly started to increase since 2012, their future is far from certain, and we still need to be doing everything we can to protect this incredible species. If you're interested in supporting Canada Warblers as well as the conservation of countless other species, please consider switching to bird-friendly coffee. Bird-friendly coffee brands can be identified by this label seen on the packaging. In order to receive this certification, coffee plantations must meet strict requirements set in place by the Smithsonian Migratory Bird Center. Unfortunately, Canada Warblers aren't the only birds who are struggling. In a report published by Birds Canada and Environment and Climate Change Canada in 2024 entitled The State of Canada's Birds, the population changes of 10 groups of birds were examined between 1970 and 2022. The results of this investigation are downright shocking. Although waterfowl, birds of prey, and wetland birds have experienced population increases, and the populations of marine and forest birds have remained relatively stable since 1970, the Canadian populations of other groups of birds have plummeted. Long-distance migrants, such as warblers, have declined by 29%. Shorebird populations have declined by 42%. And grassland birds have experienced a staggering population decline of 67%. Furthermore, species which inhabit exclusively native prairie pastures have declined by 90% due to the destruction of thousands of hectares of grassland habitat to make way for cropland and urban expansion. Some of these species include the greater sage grouse, bobolink, and chestnut-collared longspur. As it stands, birds need us, but we also need birds. Not only do birds play an important role in the Earth's ecosystems, but they also enrich our lives in so many ways. Just think of how much life they bring to our backyards, cities, and parks, or how many times birdsong has served as the soundtrack to our memories of spring and summer. If we don't act, we will lose them. So if you're interested in contributing to bird conservation, here are 2 easy things which you can do if you haven't already done so. For starters, please keep your house cats inside. On average, domestic cats kill more than 100 million birds in Canada and between 1.3 and 4 billion birds in the United States each year. And believe it or not, these are conservative estimates. If you really want your cat to experience the great outdoors, I would highly recommend either buying them a leash or building them a catio like my parents have done. The second way is to make your windows bird safe by applying either anti-window collision stickers or small squares of tape in a 5x5 centimeter grid pattern on the outside of your window. Any larger than this and birds will be undeterred from attempting to fly through the matrix of dots. This is important because an estimate of 25 million birds in Canada and roughly 1 billion birds in the United States die from window collisions each year. To further reduce the risk of window collisions, all bird feeders and baths should be placed either 3 feet or 30 feet away from any windows. So if you love birds just like I do and want to do more to protect them, this is where I would recommend you start. Now with that being said, why don't we end this video on a lighter note and go birding one last time? And this time, let's bring two very special people. A couple of weeks ago, my parents made the trek all the way from Cambridge, Ontario to come and visit me here in Slave Lake. And on one of those days, I decided to take them to a couple of my favorite birding locations.
Chickadee, and then there's, I think, female redstart.
So on.
Oh, that's really cool.
Well, I should say something. Here we are in BC. That's Britney Spears.
The only thing that doesn't quite fit with all the birds.
I don't know why she's here.
Our first location of the day was a spot not far away from Sunset Park in Canuso. What makes this place so special is that it's home to hundreds of nesting Franklin's gulls. And although the looks of these elegant gulls were distant, there's something so magical about being around this many birds. And in the end, I think my dad summed it up best.
What an amazing place.
An hour of driving later, and we arrived at our second stop of the day, Winogamy Lake Provincial Park. After a quick bite to eat, we spent a good amount of time watching the purple martins bringing food to their young. And while exploring one of the trails, we came across this beautiful yellow-bellied sapsucker, which has got to have one of the most fun bird names to say. Now my favorite thing about Winogamy is the extensive marsh habitat along the lakeshore. And what I love about marshes is that they often conceal elusive and fascinating species. And this marsh was no exception. As my family and I watched the cattails swaying in the wind, a Sora popped out along the edge of the marsh, an extremely secretive species of rail that's about the size of a robin. Although the bird didn't stay out in the open for long, this sighting was a perfect example of why I love birding so much. You just never know what you're going to see. And even if you don't see what you're looking for, spending time in the beauty of nature is never a waste of time.